Hey everyone, and welcome back to Art a la Carte. In this video, I'm going to answer a question I get on how do I create the backgrounds for my paintings. Do I paint the paintings first and then fill in the background? How do I do that? It looks really hard. And for a lot of the paintings that have kind of this blended effect that I use with watercolor, I actually paint the backgrounds in first and then create the painting over on top of it. So I went ahead and filmed the process for an upcoming painting that I am working on slowly, but I thought I would share this with you. So the first thing I'm using is blocked watercolor paper, and that's watercolor paper that's taped on all four sides to the block. If you don't have this kind, you can just tape your paper down. You will want to do this because you're going to put a ton of water on this paper, and even really good watercolor paper is going to warp a little bit. So you'll notice the tools that I use is a little tiny mist sprayer. I find that if you can get a mist bottle that has a really fine mist to it rather than a spritzer, it works better. So I get the whole paper really saturated wet, and then I begin to apply the colors. This technique is so fun. Watercolors are really forgiving and easy to go. If I put too much color on, I can always lift that paint right off of there with a paper towel. And it's really fun because you don't have a lot of control in this. So don't try to micromanage this. Let the watercolor kind of do what it wants to do. You do want to try to manage it though, knowing the more water that you put on this, the more it's going to spread. So you'll see I'll let it rest a few times. Sometimes I'll add more water, sometimes I'll dab it off, and you're just going to experiment. You're going to see how much water is going to create your paints to do this. Also, gravity is your best friend. So you'll see that I will randomly tilt my canvas up and apply paint, and that's how you're going to get that really cool like dripping effect. Now, word of warning, you're going to want to put something down underneath your paper to catch the drippings. Even if you're working on a hard surface and you don't care if it gets wet, you're just going to have paint everywhere and it's just going to be a horrible mess. So I put one of my drop cloths underneath there to kind of catch any little drips of paint that fall down in there. Now I generally do this with just watercolor paints, but sometimes if I want a really dark bold color, like for this piece, I'm going to be doing this for a fire elf piece. I wanted some really dark, so I went ahead and put some Indian ink in there. Indian ink, when it's wet, reacts very similar to watercolor, but when it dries, it's super permanent. At least it should be. If you watched my Fairy Queen picture, then you're going to know that I ran into some Indian ink that was not permanent, and it kind of messed my life up. So you want to test that out. But most of the time, once it dries, it is very permanent. So I put some of that in there, but even when it's wet, I can still pick up a lot of that ink with a paper towel. You're also going to want to keep in mind what you're going to want to draw on this paper, and you're going to want to leave those areas lighter, not completely white. I mean, you can put a masking over top of that if you want it to be super white, and a masking is kind of like this liquid plastic that you paint over top of it, allow it to dry, and then you start the painting process. Once everything is dry, then you can rub the masking off of there. But for this one, I kind of like the paints just to go everywhere, and I like to work with it. But I do dab away the darker shades from where I know that the face of the person's going to be. And then once it dries, you can actually overlay other colors. So you'll see that I'll overlay over my reds and oranges over top of the black, and it really gives a cool effect. The fun thing about this is that no two pieces are ever going to turn out exactly the same, and you never know exactly what you're going to get. Sometimes I mess up and it's not a workable piece, but a lot of times I come up with backgrounds that are so fun. I can't wait to paint on them. Well, hopefully this answers some of the questions that I receive on how I paint these kind of watercolory backgrounds in my paintings, and maybe it inspires you to go out and create some of your own pieces as well. If you have any questions about watercolor, and maybe I haven't answered them in my Watercolor 101 series, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll try to answer them in future videos. Thanks so much for hanging out with me, and until next time, God bless you guys, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye!